I guess the reason for me being up here today is really based on some experience I had in Australia when I was director of the Geological Survey in South Australia for a number of years, where we also were doing a lot of work in geoscience initiatives and interacting extensively with industry, with government, with research organisations to really get the best out of the information that we were collecting in these geoscience initiatives. And in the last 3 years since I've been back in Vancouver, I've also been involved in the TAC committee with Geoscience BC, and that's been great insight into how Geoscience BC works and drawing the parallels with what we did in Australia. And there are some very similar shared experiences between the two organisations. There's some big differences as well. I think one of the great advantages of Geoscience BC is being outside of a government organisation. You get the access and ease to draw in world experts and consultants to do a lot of this work. I guess some of the advantages of doing it from within a government organisation that we did and all the Australian surveys do is that when you're within the government, you can actually, if you've got a good department, you can really push that initiative from the pre-competitive exploration stage right through the mining stage, getting all those things lined up so you can be very efficient about how you push permitting initiatives and so on right through the whole value chain of the minerals industry. But nonetheless, I think there are positives and negatives of where you are in both those. So what I thought I'd do in terms of my talk is really look at 4 sort of key points. Briefly look at why we have them. We've seen why we've had them today, but I think it's important to sort of wrap up on this by re-looking at that. I think it's also important when you're trying to look forward on things to actually look back and see how they've evolved and seeing how sort of nuggets of ideas have come into a program and then suddenly they've got a life of their own and they've become the forefront of a program, which I think in the case of what we did in South Australia is you can see that evolution happen. I'm going to touch on how you maintain them. Craig made the point earlier on today. Geoscience BC, you're celebrating your 10th anniversary. It shows the success of this organisation in generating new ideas and doing new things. And governments get bored very quickly, so you have to keep coming up with new ideas, and the pressure's always on to say, this is the next great big thing, and we're going to help discover the next big mine. And then really the bulk of my talk is going to be just looking at where are they going and drawing on the Australian experience about where the programs are going in Australia and some of the new ideas and initiatives that are coming out there that may or may not be applicable in BC and Canada. So geoscience initiatives, we've earlier today, people touched on this, but from a government point of view, one of the reasons you have these initiatives is for investment attraction. It's really getting companies in, explorers in, to do the exploration, to generate new discoveries, and the knock-on effect of that is better economies, and particularly in remote and regional areas, really improve the economies in those regions. It's also to provide large-scale data sets, which is typically beyond the scope of most mining companies these days. Some of the big companies may have done that in the past, but really nowadays getting those big regional data sets, which has really come out today, they're so important to understand the full picture of what's happening with the geology, the geophysics, the geochemistry. Getting these big regional surveys are critical to these geoscience initiatives. There's also a quality of data access and reduction of risk. A prospector can be using this data set that in the past you need to be a Rio or a BHP to really generate these types of data sets. And again, from the government perspective, there's the custodianship of the data, and from that you can then use that for the evidence-based land use and understanding where's the best place to develop things and where you don't want to be. And obviously, as I said, generating a resource pipeline of projects that will eventually allow the economy to grow. So this slide is really to look at the sort of discovery and development drivers. And at the end of the day, if you're in a jurisdiction where you've got very uninteresting geology, then no company's going to go and explore there anyway. So there's some things that are kind of out of the control of the governments, the research organisations, the non-government organisations and the private sector. But if you've got the right geology, which you certainly have in BC and which we had in South Australia, The other important thing to have is if you've got major deposits, then that's always a stimulus for other companies to come in and explore, and particularly if there's been recent discoveries. BC's had some great recent discoveries that's really stimulated the exploration business. So if you've got all that, that's great, and you need that to really be able to get the most out of the geoscience initiatives. But where you can really start to improve, particularly from a government or non-government organisation point of view, is the information and access. And what Bruce just presented really showed, what you can do when you've got the data there. The access, online access, and the internet age that we're in now really provides a democratized approach to people being able to get hold of this data. So dissemination of that is critical. Also promotion of that information is critical, so people know it's happening in your jurisdiction. Financing is obviously the really big one as well for the companies to be able to go in and explore. It costs a lot of money to explore. And that's really driven in the private sector, but the government can actually help out that. There's good tax incentive schemes, and you have that in Canada. In Australia, we had direct incentive schemes for drilling and things like that, which I'll talk about later. The other key one is land access. I know in El Dorado we work in some pretty challenging jurisdictions, and I think most of our exploration meetings, the first hour is always talking about where can we actually go and drill. It's really challenging to get the access to land in this day and age. So, providing that land access is critical, and getting the right policies in place, getting the right community support, getting the right approach done is critical. Value chain permitting is critical. What you really want to see as an explorer is that move from finding a deposit through to actually getting a mine up and running. And there's lots of jurisdictions around the world where there's big discoveries being made, but it takes a very, very long time to actually get them into production, if at all. So that's a key part of the role of government, and also an important role for industry to make sure that they're putting in the applications correctly, that they're consulting with the communities and so on. Enabled workforce, really that's again part and parcel of the whole sector there in terms of government support, in terms of research organisations and industry as well, having that skill base there to be able to carry out the exploration and carry out the operations. And then technological advance is something I'm going to really push at the end of the talk, because that's where I see some of the sort of future geoscience initiatives perhaps going, is really a collaboration an integration of technologies to really push the boundaries of where we're going to go in terms of finding the next big discoveries. So that's something I'll talk more about at the end. And this is just another way of looking at that. This is a slide that come out of the group in South Australia. It's really the link between the government and private sector and how that interacts. Land access is critical to get onto the land and explore, and you want to be able to do as much of that as possible, because explorers on the whole aren't that very good, so they need to get to lots of land to try and assess these areas and increase their percentage chance of actually finding a major discovery. But with support into sort of human and intellectual capital, that's really going to improve people's skill base and hopefully make us smart explorers. And then the really big one that we've heard a lot from today is this pre-competitive geoscientific data, and that's really critical to help get out there and explore and target your areas, and then do the follow-up work from the industry point of view. So what I thought I'd do now is just look at the evolution of the geoscience initiative we had in South Australia and draw some parallels what I've seen in BC. And I think a lot of other programs around the world have shown a similar thing. And it kind of reflects where we are in the exploration industry as well, that it's not just about the science these days, it's about all the whole factors of land access, dealing with communities, making sure we're doing the environmentally responsible things, the whole story. But when they started off the initiatives in South Australia, it was very much initially focused on data sets, and particularly geophysical data sets. I'll show you some slides later on in the talk about, the challenge in South Australia in particular is the cover. So geophysics is a major way of going forward with exploring. So some of the early days of initiatives there were really focused on release of big geophysical data sets, and they were fantastic. They were game-changing in how people explored. But then as it evolved into the 2000s, The PACE program, which is really the initiative that's there now, the Plan for Accelerating Exploration, you started to see a real broadening of themes, so from environment through policy, through dealing with communities, as well as the key things around geophysical release, geochemistry release, but also setting up educational centres. So the Centre for Mineral Exploration Undercover was sort of a pre-runner to the now Deep Exploration Technology CRC, which is based in South Australia. So you can see the initiative money is sort of moving into other spaces in that area, and particularly within the South Australian government, this allowed us to really focus on that value chain of, once you've made a discovery, making sure that the mines department were on the same page, pushing through those new mines and making sure that there was like a one-stop shop, a really streamlined process to get the results of the early pre-competitive data, the discoveries, right through to the mining procedures and permitting. And it was a great example in South Australia where they went from sort of 4 mines in the early 2000s to at a peak of about 13 mines with another 4 approvals. So a very, very good reaction and response to the discoveries. And then this is what the PACE system looks like nowadays there, and you can see there's a real range of topics that it's covering. But again, if you look at the budget table on the side, the exploration one is still the big focus. So that's taken the bulk of the budget. That's where the big geophysical surveys are coming in. That's where the drilling initiatives are coming in, and so on, geological mapping, geochemistry, and so on. But they're certainly spreading their money into things like making sure there's good permitting around land access, community consultation, and so on. And it was interesting being in the TAC committee yesterday and just discussing some of these issues, because there's a similar story in Geoscience BC. You know, the focus of Geoscience BC has been really to deliver these great projects, whether it's geochemistry, geology, or geophysics, and making sure they get integrated, but also getting into other fields. So there's a big focus on the oil and gas and energy sector, geothermal we've heard about, water, the community engagement, and just really recognising that geoscience is an economic driver. So one of the things that we really became successful with in South Australia was one part of the initiative, which, as I said, started off as a fairly small idea, but really got steam, and as I'll show you in terms of the way they're going forward in Australia now, has really, really taken the lead. But this was this discovery drilling collaboration, and this was essentially a system set up that's been running for 10 years now, and they've had, in South Australia, they've had about eight rounds of this, whereby the government is basically offering to support drilling programs. And the great thing about it is this: you can organise the way you review these programs to really target sort of greenfield areas. And I think that's what we recognised in South Australia. There was not a lot of greenfields exploration going on at the time. How do we get that to happen? Well, we developed this policy where we can contribute to the drilling programs. And it underwent a very thorough review from experts within the Geological Survey as well as industry experts, and the scheme was such that you could match up to 50% of your drilling up to 100,000, and one of the things we saw over time is that it really improved the way people explored in the state, because they really thought about these proposals, really got all the information together on their tenement, all the data that was available, put that together and produced a really good targeting approach. And even if there wasn't a success there, the survey took the data and put that on the database, so you could slowly build up this really comprehensive data set. There's over 300 kilometres of data that's been generated from this drilling in the state now. And then one of the obviously important things is it did lead to some major discoveries, and we've probably all heard the story of Carapatina, which was in round 2 of this collaborative program, where Rudy Gomez, who was a prospector and who, I think the story is, he mortgaged his house to fund part of this drilling, and he was awarded one of the collaborative drilling programs, and on the second hole of that collaborative drilling program, he hit 178 metres at almost 2% copper, and over 0.5 gram gold, and that turned into the Carrapateena discovery and the resource figures there, and Oz Minerals are currently in the process of getting that into development. You can see how challenging it is, though, because that was under almost 500 metres of cover, so that's the kind of challenge that you're dealing with in South Australia. So a success like that really does help you as a government organisation or a non-government organisation keep promoting and keep getting funding. So, you know, when you go back to the government, as we did in South Australia, and say, well, we helped make this discovery, then that's great. But it's really important to have those kind of metrics at your fingertips. You know, we've heard some this morning from Geoscience BC's contribution in British Columbia, and very similar story in South Australia. You can measure that there's been a significant increase in exploration take-up, and yeah, that may be due to the big boom in the industry, but actually when you look at South Australia's share compared to the rest of Australia, it's significantly outperformed many of the other states, and it's actually maintained that at almost double the level of the pre-PACE program. And you know, metrics such as how much private investment that generated, and the leverage effect of that government funding to draw in that investment attraction. And online, there's a really good review of that was an independent review that's pulled all that statistics together, and happy to pass that information on to you if you want to have a look at that. The other important thing is aligning it with government priorities, and we did that at both the state and at the federal level, key economic priorities, key strategies around mineral exploration undercover. So the main thing I want to talk about now is where these things are heading, and I think in Australia where it's heading is this, as you've talked about today, this integration of all these data sets towards producing the next big discovery. They've taken it another step further in Australia, where they're also bringing in the new technology. And back in 2010, there was the new deep exploration technology, CRC, developed that was aimed at improving drilling, because we can get smarter and smarter about how we explore, but if you can reduce the cost of exploration, if you can make it quicker, and if you can make real-time decisions, then that's really going to improve your chances of exploration success. So the deep exploration technology, CRC, which is based in Adelaide and had strong government support as well as these major companies supporting it. And another key factor was the role of the service sector in there and the service industry. So we had many of the big consultant agencies and the service providers getting right involved, such as Boart Longyear, Index, Reflex, and so on. And they've really helped promote things like downhole technology and lab at the rig type technology, which is really going to move the industry forward. And here's some of the examples of that. This is the new coiled tubing drill rig that they've developed through the DET CRC. It's not out in the field doing routine drilling yet, but they've got it on the test site in South Australia and have been drilling it. There's also the back of the rig type technology. Talk to Pim about that. He's involved in bringing that into North America through Reflex. That's a great new technology. And these are the sort of downhole information that you can get real time, make decisions while you're drilling, and really hopefully reduce that risk and reduce the cost. And then also, we've heard today about this mineral systems approach to geology, really bringing together all the information of the geology, the geophysics, and the geochemistry. That picture in the top corner there is not of Mars. We heard about the SkyTem going to Mars. That's actually 90% of South Australia there. It's very much a moonscape, and it always makes me laugh when I'm in places around the world and they say, oh, there's not much outcrop here, and I said, no, that's not much outcrop. So, you know, what I've been really impressed about here is the integration of the geology and the geophysics, and it's a lot harder in South Australia because we just don't have the outcrop to back it up. But, you know, bringing together the geochemistry, the drilling data, and one of the great things they set up in South Australia is the core library. So we've got historic data from all the drilling that's been done in the state. When you're paying that much money to drill, it's really important to keep that material, and we've used that to really reconstruct the 3D geology of the state and integrate that with the geophysics, and also things like the high logger to map the alteration and integrate all that data into an integrated approach. So this is the kind of thing that we've seen today, really bringing together all those disciplines, geology, geochemistry, geophysics, linking it all together. But where they're going forward in Australia now is actually then introducing this drilling technology and going out and doing this mineral systems drilling. And that really is the next evolution in this collaborative drilling program. They announced this year a $2 million investment into collaborative drilling between the DET, CRC, the government survey, and the industry, and opened up bids for companies to say, we want you to come and do this mineral systems drilling on our ground. We'll contribute, drilling costs and we'll help target some of the holes. But also a lot of it is about wide space drilling to try and understand the entire mineral system. A lot of iron oxide, copper, gold mineral systems in South Australia, which have really big footprints, so it works well in that type of deposit. But it's really this collaboration and integration of new technology, the mineral systems approach, the integration of all these different data sets to help really understand and target the deposits. So I'll just finish up with some of the important factors that come from the governments and initiatives such as Geoscience and Geoscience BC's initiatives. Key drivers are, well, you're not going to change the prospectivity, geology or of the province you work in, but you can really get the message out there, get the data out there and make it easier to access and explore. Land access is always a big one for exploration companies, so if we can get that in an efficient manner so that people can get on the ground and explore, then that's fantastic. And then if you do make a discovery, making sure that permitting process is as efficient as possible. And then financing, yes, tax incentives and direct funding initiatives are great ideas. And then really enabling the explorer to get out there and be able to explore. So, these regional data sets are still the key. You're going to carry on, continue to do some big geophysical surveys, and they're the fundamental data sets. But maybe you think about direct exploration initiatives and integrating the new technologies that are beginning to emerge out there at the moment to really hopefully bring the next mine and the next big new discoveries. So thank you very much.